Hello, everyone. Happy Thursday. My name is Josh Chapdelaine, and I am kicking us off here on All Tech is Humans weekly live stream series, where we feature conversations about a wide variety of topics throughout the responsible tech ecosystem. All Tech is Human is a nonprofit committed to building the world's largest multi stakeholder, multidisciplinary network in responsible tech. You can read our reports, such as our flagship Responsible Tech Guide and our recent Responsible Tech Org list, at our website at alltechishuman.org. You can also become engaged with a global community of people interested in creating a better tech future on Slack, where we have more than 9,000 members across 90 countries engaging in conversations about topics including responsible AI, tech policy, youth tech and well-being, and today's subject matter, trust and safety. Additionally, you can learn more about emerging and established career opportunities on our Responsible Tech job board and join our talent pool to be matched with relevant opportunities in the field. And so, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce this live stream about empowering trust and safety professionals and careers in the field by introducing my colleague, Matt Soeth. Matt, thanks so much for taking the time to join and host this live stream today.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. Excited to be here. Welcome to Empowering Trust and Safety Professionals. Happy Thursday as well, or for those of you who partake, happy Friday Eve. I want to give a big welcome to my colleagues here today, to trust and safety professionals who honestly are pretty amazing, and we want to get into their stories. I'm going to give them a chance to introduce themselves really quickly before we dive into the questions. So first off, I want to introduce Patricia. Patricia, how are we doing?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Very excited to join this conversation, intimidated to join two titans like Skip and Matt, but excited to contribute my piece and share a little bit about the, meandering paths that took me to trust and safety and where I'm at today.
I love that. Next up, we have Skip. Skip, joining us all the way from the East Coast. Skip, how are we doing today, man?
I'm doing pretty good. It's a beautiful day over here in Richmond, Virginia. So I'm Skip Gilmour. I'm the intelligence and investigative lead at Roblox for violent extremism. I've been there for about 2 years now. In a previous life, I worked at the FBI for about 5 years, where I worked in the counterterrorism division as an analyst. I'm really excited to connect with all sorts of people here today, who are interested in the field or perhaps are already in the field. So I'm really excited to kick off the conversation.
Yeah, as you can tell from Skip's answer, we're going to talk about the light stuff today. Just simple investigations, no heavy content, just basic extremism, maybe some child safety. This is the work that we do. So kicking off, Patricia, fun fact, you've been doing this for a while, which is amazing because you don't look old enough to be doing that. But within that, looking back to early days at Facebook, at Twitter, across the industry, what has been the biggest change? One, I'd love to give you a little backstory in terms of where you started in trust and safety, because I think that's an interesting point I want to come back to. But then two, what's the biggest change you've seen from those early days in online safety, when we didn't even call it that yet, to what is happening today when we think of tooling or policy or process in online safety?
Yeah, thank you for bringing up my youth. I certainly don't feel that I have the young looks anymore, because I've been working in this industry since before we coined the term trust and safety to describe the work. So I started as a young 21-year-old in 2006 at Google, looking at search quality. That was it at the time. What were the attempts to manipulate the algorithm so that certain sites, some were spam, some were not, but maybe had some black hat techniques, would rank higher. And then as I transitioned to social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter on their early days in Europe, really the conversations were more about what do we allow? What do we not allow? What type of platform do we want to be? Some really foundational questions that translated into everyday practices that the trust and safety practitioners needed to apply. And so, I've kind of been at the forefront of fascinating challenges in terms of content moderation, doing the content moderation work myself, looking at scaling, doing localized support. I was based in Ireland for 10 years in the European headquarters of these companies. And, I've also done the public policy piece, like talking to regulators, policymakers about why a piece of content would remain up, or what happens, when you sometimes might want to be incredibly protective and scan a lot of content to try and detect abuse, but what does that mean for privacy? What is the natural tension between those two, and what are the trade-offs that we have to navigate on a daily basis? So I feel like, really, when I look back from 2006 to now, what's changed on one hand is that we are an industry. I think we're established as an industry. We know who we are. Trust and safety is now a term that is recognized. I think a lot of businesses, and sometimes it's not within tech, there's many like adjacent industries that also need trust and safety recognize. We need to hire trust and safety. It's not just about user generated content. It's a lot more than that. It is offline harms. It is dating. It is gaming. It is virtual reality. So the fact that we're now more established, we have All Tech is Human, we have the Trust and Safety Professional Association, the Integrity Institute, we're more coordinated, we can lean on each other, we're no longer working in silos, and that makes a huge difference for a volume of work that can really take a toll on your mental health when you're working in an isolated way. And then I think secondly, to back in the day, when I think about my incursions into public policy, and now I work as a consultant with the Blue Owl Group, and all of us have worked in public policy and communications. We've been battle tested and been at the forefront of some of these very difficult conversations. And I look back and I think that self-regulation was the approach that we were going for. A lot of that was due to the complexity of the moderation at scale, and developing policy at scale for multiple jurisdictions. But it's become very clear that policymakers and regulators need to be a part of the conversation, and that at times there will be laws that need to be robust and will keep us accountable, and we'll also give the public an opportunity to have a say in how the platforms operate. So I look back and I think that is like another huge shift that has taken place, and I'm very encouraged when I speak to the e-safety commissioner of Australia, or when I look at Ofcom's efforts, or the European Commission's efforts, and I think it's all of those challenges we now navigate together, and that makes me, now as a parent with kids, we're starting to use technology. In addition to being a trust and safety practitioner, it makes me feel more confident in the work that we're putting forward.
What is amazing to me is how small that window is, and how much change has occurred in such a short amount of time, right? And the increase in the amount of stakeholders who are contributing to the conversation, and just that general evolution. A lot to unpack there. Really quick, I want to give a shout out to some of our folks joining in. Sharon, where you're from. Fortune from Nigeria. I think you could be the winner of the furthest person away who's tuning into this live stream. So thank you for that. If folks have questions, Patricia just shared a lot of info. Please feel free to add those questions into the comments. We'll try and get those. We have some time carved out at the end of today to ask that. There's a lot of great information happening here so far. Want to transition a bit, because another wonderful entry into the space is Skip. Similar but different. Yes, and but Skip, I mean, you started investigations, you worked in law enforcement, but that led to work in tooling and policy and some regulations we talked about recently. What were the skills and experiences that prepared you for the work that you're doing now?
Of course. So I honestly feel like, for me, the transition has actually been quite smooth. So working at the FBI, working in this kind of like intel capacity, I think one of the biggest skills that helped me transfer over very easily was, working in kind of a legalistic analysis, having to kind of withhold certain theoretical frameworks to what you're working on, that carries over. So in the FBI, we had to create and adhere to like these repeatable legalistic standards to categorize investigations so that we could actually create actionable trends that could help agents and ultimately, actually move resources around the Bureau. This kind of translates to me pretty directly over into developing policy and tools, because ultimately, what is the development of policy and tools other than, dictating what the logic of the platform is when you delegate responsibility out to other people, because we can't all be of one mind. Everyone has certain different expectations of what reasonableness is. So, that's how I really see it. From the tools perspective, from the policy perspective, I kind of see it as something of a machine. The engineers are the folks that are really putting the pieces together that make it actually go. But from my perspective, my value add there is I'm the end user of the internal policy and that internal logic. I have to see what are those externalities that are created by this product. What is expected that we didn't expect to? What are the positives? And also, how are adversarial actors going to adapt to any given change that we do? Because they're always looking for new ways to kind of game the system, so to speak. So that's kind of where I take my expertise from the FBI and kind of marry it with that product and policy development side. Also, honestly, just communication. As we've already talked about today, there's a lot of new regulations that are out there, and trust and safety is a very nascent industry. Trust and safety is housed under different areas in different companies. So, you may not always be working with that important cross-functional partner who's going to be very valuable to you in a couple months. So it's important that you're building these relationships proactively. Never assume that another team just knows what you're doing. So that when it comes time that you have to be part of these big working groups with all sorts of different people from the company, you already have that relationship built up and it's a little more frictionless to work with other people. So that's what I would say for my part.
That's such a great call. And I can tell you, being at TikTok, going from a small team to a bigger team, like one of my last projects, we'd have like 27 people sort of signing off on, large, product upgrades or announcements, from comms to marketing to business development, product policy. That communication is crucial to executing on that. No, some great call outs there. As we step sideways a little bit, getting more tactical, one of the things that came up at our May 14th All Tech is Human event was this conversation that most people get into trust and safety through a side door, right? And it's interesting to be in a space where it feels incredibly hard to break into, but like once you're in, you're in. So thinking about if I'm a new person, I could be in academia, I could be FBI law enforcement, I could be research, there's a lot of avenues, public service, and I want to break into the industry. What advice would you give them in terms of developing skills, gaining knowledge, or just strategically thinking about how to apply and get that first role? Patricia, let's start with you first.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. For what is worth, I went to college to study translation and interpreting. My goal was to be an interpreter in the UN, and I somehow got completely derailed. My mom is still really upset that I'm not a UN interpreter. No matter what I do, it's never going to be as good. But I think it's a good example because really it's all a matter of skill set that is transferable to trust and safety. And I think trust and safety is such a wide field, right? Like you have people working in product, just like Skip was saying, people that are developing policies, people who are really good at operations and really enjoy the challenge of how to staff the queues for content or escalations that you need to review, how to prioritize, the many different balls that we have up in the air when we need to have quick turnaround times. So I would, my recommendation would be get over imposter syndrome, because you probably have a skill set that would land you very well in the trust and safety field. You're probably doing work already that is comparable to what you would be doing in trust and safety. It'll be like an analogy of what you would be doing in trust and safety. And one example I wanted to share is I recently was working with a healthcare marketplace company And I, would partner very closely with the clinical team. So these are, medical professionals who would investigate any escalation for a clinical component. And as I reviewed their work, it really struck me that it was trust and safety. It was taking a look, analyzing a number of elements in a quick turnaround time and putting forward recommendations for how the product should work moving forward, but also what to do with that specific escalation. And when I told them you belong in trust and safety, they were surprised and at the same time encouraged, because it was a field that they wanted to break into. So I think it's, that's why All Tech is Human to me brings so much value, because you have this chance to let people know that, hey, you probably already have the skill set. And it is a matter of looking for the opportunities, the projects that might get you, as you said, Matt, through the door. And I would also say, by the way, reach out to people on LinkedIn. If you really want to know, you might be like, I really like product, but I also like policy. What would I do? I've worked on user-generated content. I've worked on search. I've worked on offline harms for marketplaces. Trust and safety just means wearing very different hats, and you have to figure out what you like most, what you might be more passionate about. So reach out to people. All Tech is Human, again, is a fantastic network. I just love being on the Slack and seeing all the passion. So reach out to people, ask, but also think about where you're at right now and what skill set is transferable, because you're not an imposter. You probably belong at that table.
That's such a great call out, and emphasizing the word, thinking about how you ask, right? Because it's coming in and be like, hey, what does product do? What does policy do? Versus, hey, if I apply for the job, can you give me a recommendation? It's like, I don't even know you yet, right? But I do think there's a genuine interest in trying to nurture that next group and provide insight and information. That's a very excellent point. Skip, same question over to you.
Sure, absolutely. So I think we've covered a lot of really good ground. I really want to echo the element of transferable skills over. I think when I left the FBI to go to tech, there were a lot of questions from people who just didn't understand that these kinds of jobs even exist. A lot of them thought, well, you don't code, you're not an engineer, why are you going over here? Or they thought the only thing that these companies would be interested in is cyber work, which I just didn't do cyber work. So there's just that kind of knowledge gap. Because some of these roles are just not well thought of, at least. Again, I really want to say, as we've mentioned, do not hold yourself back from this sense of imposter syndrome. Like we've mentioned, there are definitely going to be things in almost any field that you're in that you're going to be able to kind of translate over. For me, obviously, I'm going from an investigative role at the FBI to an investigative role at a tech company. So it's quite a literal transition. But, if you have experience doing program management, leveraging institutional change to make things work better, I mean, that's very operations focused. And something that could easily be transferred over to the trust and safety space. I definitely think networking, reaching out to people is always good. I think that people in this particular niche of the tech world, trust and safety, I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb and say we have to be a little more empathetic a lot of the times, because these are very sensitive topics. So we're used to kind of dealing with that sort of thing. I've had a lot of really good experience reaching out to people, networking with folks, and chatting. I think, to Matt's point, you don't want to walk into any of these conversations thinking, okay, I'm going to basically open the door asking, can you give me a recommendation? You really want to spend time, build rapport with them, find common cause with them, because if you want to get in trust and safety, by all means, you're likely going to have that common cause of wanting to keep things safe. Just kind of demonstrate that. And I think people are really willing to help you develop and grow and give you tips. Also, I think one thing I'll say is kind of on the imposter syndrome piece, really show levels of curiosity when you're in the door through that trust and safety in your first trust and safety jobs. So I came in as an investigator. I don't think there was a lot of expectation that I'd be helping with developing tools, so to speak. But even though I'm not a quote unquote a technical employee, it's really beneficial to me to be able to ask those questions to the technical employees, to understand what they're doing and what their limitations are, because I can't really advocate for creation of tools if I don't know what the reality of what they can actually execute is. It may be more than you think, and it may be less. So I think that's really important, and kind of getting over the fear of looking non-knowledgeable. Especially if you are suffering from imposter syndrome, you may not want to ask questions because you don't want to look like you don't know. But you're not being paid to know. You're not the technical employee, and you can only improve yourself by asking those questions and putting yourself in that vulnerable situation.
Those are some great points. I really, the networking, how you reach out, connecting with folks, asking questions, building relationships, and just the curiosity, right? Because the space is constantly changing and shifting. I think those are some good things. You kind of beat me to one of the questions I had for later. So I love that preemptive strategy. Those are some great answers. To our folks in the audience, if you would, please feel free to add in your own questions. We do have some time for that here coming up. Also, too, kind of want to add to that, like for in this space, Patricia, I know you handled a lot of partnerships, particularly in your time at Twitter, external engagement. Skip, I know you and I have collaborated in different working groups and stuff. But thinking too about just tech adjacent, right? We touched on this a little bit, but what are some ways, if I'm not directly working for a platform, what are some ways that I can sort of hone these skills and groups I can work with and develop that content expertise, or to learn how platforms kind of communicate and work in that matter? So we're going to switch it up. Skip, we'll start with you on this one.
Sure, sounds good. So some ways that you can get into like a tech adjacent field, like as Patricia kind of mentioned, getting involved with organizations like this, or like the Integrity Institute. I know that this organization, Integrity Institute, they both host frequent kind of discussions, like the one we're having now, or some more open forum discussions where they talk about like what are broader issues that are going on in trust and safety. I think those are really important ways that you can kind of form like some better ideas about how to kind of like affect change within the tech space. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
Oh, good.
Patricia.
Yeah, if I can add to that, I feel like you're cheating because you came from that, civil society. So you should be the one answering this question. But in any case, I'll give my observations. And I would say, if you're passionate about a specific subject, and this happens, right? Like, I think that trust and safety, while a lot of the general public might not even know trust and safety, or maybe now they do, and before they didn't. Thank you, Elon Musk, for really putting us on the map. But people feel really passionate about it. I have like incredible family conversations about, philosophical conversations about freedom of speech and censorship, and how do you protect people? Like, how far should a platform go? And one thing I've noticed is some people might feel very strongly about a specific field of abuse, right? We know that vulnerable communities get targeted more on certain platforms. And so say that you're passionate about women's rights and you think that there is gender-based harassment happening online and you want to be a part of that conversation. There's a wealth of organizations like the National Network to End Domestic Violence and the National Center for Victims of Crime. And a lot of these nonprofits will work with volunteers. And I've worked with volunteers of those organizations, as you said, Matt. At Twitter, we built the Trust and Safety Council, and giving them a seat at the table, showing them the product features we were working on. And they could say, "Ooh, if you build blog that way, an abuser could use it in X, Y, and Z way. So you might not want to do that. Or if you do it, just think about this mitigation strategy," right? So getting them at seat at the table, enabling them to think about the policies, the product, bringing in the expertise of what it's like to do at scale. Like, we want to do that, but here's the downside if we do it that way, right? So really engaging in a constructive dialogue, was incredibly helpful. And I feel like there is a lot of human rights defenders out there, like digital human rights defenders, that can also get into this field by working with this wealth of organizations. Right now, I feel like we're all talking about Gen AI daily. I think of organizations like Witness, Brooklyn-based nonprofit that do incredible work on provenance. And anytime they speak, my ears just really open up because I learned so much from listening to them. and from listening to the human rights defenders that they are arming with technology so that they can provide information accurately to the public. So that's like certainly a really good point, Matt. I think don't discount that if you're passionate about a specific subject, there will be a civil society group, and that is not just in the US. Like there's incredible groups all around the world working on this matters. Like I'm immediately thinking of CSR in India, for instance, who do a lot of work on online safety. So think about what you're passionate about and look at those civil society groups, because chances are they are engaging with platforms, startups, and if they aren't, I guarantee you that if they reach out to those companies, they will be listened to.
No, those are some great examples and ways, like totally to your point. Skip, like I had no idea this industry existed whatsoever. Like I'm just like, I'm going to go into teaching because that's, as an English major, what was available to me. And then once I discovered a need for this work on the ground, Patricia, that's how you and I met. It's just then it was out being, building relationships, connecting with other folks, being passionate about it, not being afraid to make calls. And like one of my internal values was very much about how can I add value, right? I always want to try to add value to the situation. Alltech is human. Like David and I met on Twitter, pre-X era, where it's just like, hey, I care about this. And we scheduled a phone call and here we are, right? And having these amazing conversations. So anytime I think when you have that passion, I will say it took a long time for me to break in, because it's just like, you're an educator. Like we work really hard here. And I'm like, I work hard too. But you kind of, you're in your stripes, you build those relationships and, people are like, yeah, we think this person can do the work. So highly encourage folks to stay consistent and not get frustrated as this process goes on. To that, so like as I made choices in my career, a lot of those were value driven by me, like internally, right? Like I always want to add value. I want to contribute back. I love solving problems at a high level or a societal level where I can, bigger impact type stuff. Skip, you had a great call out about this industry. Like I said, you preempted one of my questions about how we're highly empathic in trust and safety. That's okay, because it's a good segue. One of the things that I appreciate about both of you in that sense is when, Patricia, like when I met you, Skip, when I met you, talking in these working groups or whatever it was, you both left me with the sense of like, hey, reach out however I can help. Right. And I feel like from a trust and safety standpoint, most people I meet are just like, let me know what you need, however I can help. What is it in you? What is like a value or a sentiment that you have that sort of makes you want to be that person for others, to want to be that person for the internet, and kind of drives you in this work? Patricia, we'll kick it back to you this time.
Yeah, I'm scared my answer is going to be incredibly cheesy. So please allow me the cheesiness moment. But I have this distinct memory of, I think I was in my mid-20s and I was, as I said before, based in Ireland, and I'm originally from Spain. I would fly home for the holidays. And I would work from home. Again, at that time, Facebook was a small platform. We all had to do a lot of escalations. And I overheard my mom on the phone to my grandma. And my grandma was asking, I'm guessing she was asking what I was doing. And my mom said something like, right now she's either battling child sexual abuse material or looking at extremism. Not sure which one. And I had this, like, first I was impressed. I'm like, okay, they get my job. Finally, I've been trying to explain it for a couple of years. They didn't get it. Now they get it. But second, I was like struck by this thought that I really didn't want these two women to ever encounter the content that I was reviewing. And it brought a lot of worth to the work that I was doing, right? Because sometimes you can go down rabbit holes. It is, very mentally taxing. But I thought, well, if I keep working well, they won't have to see that content. I'll shield them from it. Not that we need to shield everybody from all types of content, but I think, there is certain some content that I don't, illegal content that I don't think people should be have to be exposed to. And I think that really is why I like trust and safety. I've never met anybody in this industry that wasn't doing it for the right reasons, right? Like there's a lot of selflessness. It's like you do this work day in, day out to create a safer internet. We know that the internet can be an incredibly, powerful communication tool, but in the wrong hands, it can, promote division. It can be used for misinformation, for extremism, to cause, real world harm. And the question is, how do we prevent that? How do we actually join forces so that we reclaim the potential of the internet? And that's what I see when I speak to trust and safety professionals. And I think that's what leads to us being quite open about, let's work together. You can't do it by yourself. And even if everybody in your platform was like, we're going to do this the right way, you need to be talking to other companies, other startups. You have a responsibility too, to share your learnings so that we're not all making the same mistakes and bashing our heads against the wall. But also, it really is a matter of civil society and just society in general. And I just absolutely love that about this industry. I think it's what really motivates me on a daily basis.
Yeah, Skip.
That's a great answer. So I have two answers. One is kind of cheesy, and one is, it's also true, but it's like the secondary one. So the first is essentially, it's honestly like that sense of like right and wrong. Like what is, I don't want people to be harmed. And, you get that feeling that, you see someone who's hurting other people, and you're like, I get to stop that. That's an intense kind of like, good. That is a good feeling to do. I kind of wanted to join the tech world from the FBI because I had seen, time after time, especially working on like domestic terrorism related cases, there being a thing of like, the law is not such that there's a lot of space in between kind of like something that's very brutal hate speech versus like what actually turns into the mobilization of violence. And I wanted to be a part of like that system that kind of maybe got people to the point where they were not getting that close to doing some sort of real world harm sort of thing. And from like the secondary perspective, and what I think honestly these days keeps it fresh for me, is that there's a deep interest in me in like, I don't know, the drama and kind of like nonsensicalness of it all. A lot of the time, like the new ideas and things that pop up, like the very wacky conspiracy theories, like they're very interesting in the sense that, you're like, what are they going to think of next? In that way, it does keep it kind of fun, and also keeps like a level of almost like levity, despite the fact that oftentimes these do result in like, really bad things. So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
That is quite possibly my favorite trust and safety answer ever. You're like, oh, this is wacky and interesting. And it's like almost playing out like a reality TV show. Like, that's how I know you're a trust and safety person, because you're just like, no, I love talking about this.
Yeah, I do. It's because that's like all I talk about is like these kinds of concepts and ideas. So I'm very happy that I get to work in them.
I feel like that could be a fun game. Could it be like real conspiracy theory or fake conspiracy theory? Like that would be like a good trust and safety icebreaker.
I would love
that.
Have
some fun with that. All right, patent pending. We'll work on that one. We do have a question from the audience. Great question from Christo. Shapri. Yeah, great call out. I got to say, I get this question a lot. Christo says, I see lots of TNS jobs with requirements for years of moderation or managing harms experience, but not a lot of seemingly entry-level roles. Where are they? Or is the expectation for even entry-level roles that you bring your experience from elsewhere? Kind of toss that. I don't know, Skip or Patricia. I don't know if either one of you like to take that, or Skip.
Sure. So, I mean, I do think with a lot of these kind of job vacancies, I think when they say things like, like moderation or managing harms experiences like that, I think there's often like an openness to taking in other experience as relevant experience that is not directly that. If you can kind of frame it that way in your resume and in your interviews, so that it is true to the spirit of the qualification. I do think as far as entry level things go, I don't know if I didn't go down that route myself, because I went from the FBI first, but I do know a lot of people come in from like more academic backgrounds, and that is often kind of like a substitute for experience there. Another thing I would kind of recommend too is a place that I've heard a lot of people get their start is with like vendor companies first. These companies that, often serve the larger companies, and then eventually, you have that experience there, and then you can transition in. Would you agree with that, Patricia?
I do, and I'm really bummed because you just
take
said
it?
my answer. I was about to go.
Thing?
Yeah, I was about to go that way. And I was gonna mention it because I feel like when I first came into the industry, there weren't as many third-party vendors as there are now, and that's a good thing, right? Like I feel like that becomes, it means that we become a, professionalized force. But you have companies like Partnered Hero that do incredible work, or Taskas are very thoughtful about, what type of support they can provide to companies that have trust and safety needs. So I would say they are a fantastic way in. And in fact, by the time that I had reached, Twitter, I had been in my career for close to 10 years. That was a very common path in, is somebody wouldn't have been in-house, but they would have worked for a multitude of companies through these third-party vendors. So they brought a wealth of experience because they hadn't moderated content at just one platform, but they had done it at a few. And the other piece I was going to mention too is I joined an on-demand delivery company years ago to start trust and safety from scratch. And at that time, offline harms, there wasn't as many people that had been working on them. Think of the marketplace safety, so like the Ubers and the Lyfts of this world. So we had a very limited pool of people that we could hire for. And on the job descriptions, we would say like we want, like 3-4 years of experience, ideally offline harms. But the reality is that as we started interviewing, we would have people who maybe had worked for a year or two on other trust and safety issues. And we found that skill set very transferable. So I would say, don't self-disqualify, be bold when you apply. Like I would still apply, because you might be considered. And I think the more you engage in the hiring process, the more that your transferable skill set will be taken into account. And we certainly I feel like every hire that we did was an exception to that rule in terms of we want X amount of offline harms experience. We never actually went for candidates that had that experience. So third-party vendors, certainly civil society that works, in the adjacent field, another great way in. And then just be bold, don't self-disqualify, and know that there's a lot of flexibility on the part of the hiring managers. And once you build a rapport, it's much easier for that flexibility to really come through.
Yeah, one other thing that I find very consistent in trust and safety is very real imposter syndrome, right? It's just like, oh, I don't know, maybe that you probably do meet the requirements, but how you position it. I know a lot of friends who went from academia education into tech. They're like, I'm not getting an interview. It's like, what do you have on your resume? And I realized they wrote their resume like they're trying to get another teaching job, not that they're trying to get into another tech job. So that's actually a great thing to reach out to a mentor and be like, hey, I got this resume. Could you take a look at it? And how would you recommend I reword it? All great skills. As we're getting close, we got a few more minutes here. Kind of one more question. There's, Patricia, you just hit on it. There's been a unique evolution in online safety, right? We often think of online safety in terms of user-generated content, UGC, and historically that's been true for many, many years, right? Your TikToks and Metas, Instagrams, X, you name it. Within that, how has marketplace, the addition of offline risk, how has it sort of changed the online safety space, new roles and opportunities that we see happening in online safety?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I distinctively remember the first time a colleague of mine, and I want to say it was 2011, said that they were leaving Facebook for Uber. And I was just like, Uber, why would a taxi company need trust and safety? Again, you can still be in the field and be completely blinded to the needs of the wider tech ecosystem to have trust and safety. So it's like, I kind of don't get it. But of course, he went on to join Uber. He did fantastic work at Uber. And years later, I thought, I had seen a little bit offline harms. Doxing can have like impact offline, of course, swatting, things like that. And I thought, I actually want to give that a go. So I moved on to marketplace safety, and it was some of the years that I've learned the most in my career, because you have to think about how to prevent and mitigate situations that are outside of your control. You're not there in the physical world to prevent them. And so you're constantly thinking of product safety features like, okay, what if I build a panic button that can really help somebody if they're in the middle of a delivery of goods and something goes wrong? How do I work with law enforcement when maybe a matter of minutes can make a huge difference? So really, when I talk about marketplace safety, I'm thinking of technologies that enable humans to meet in the offline world, and that is by design, right? It's like the platform wants you to be able to get a delivery of pizza, or wants you to be able to get, as I said before, healthcare marketplace wants a clinic or a hospital to be able to get a nurse to fulfill a shift. So it's a really fascinating field, and the risks are much higher. So even if you don't get as high volume as you would on a user-generated content platform, it only takes one bad escalation with, somebody's life being threatened to really impact you very severely. So really fascinating space. And I love, again, once again, that you can be within trust and safety and your interest gets piqued. I think another good example is virtual reality, right? Like there's so many potential harms that come with virtual reality, and just thinking through what can happen, what turns somebody into a victim, how can we prevent it, and how do I go into that field next? And I love this ability to pivot as you learn more and more techniques. The same goes for AI. I'm working right now a lot on Gen AI and thinking about how do I prevent bots from creating the content that abuses or violates the community guidelines of the platform. So really novel use cases that I get to work on, and I love it.
Knowledge, learning, interesting problems, transferable skills. I'm detecting a pattern. Hey, Skip, different kind of marketplace, not necessarily UGC, but gaming. How are we seeing growth and trust and safety in gaming? What does that evolution look like on your end?
So for Roblox, obviously we're not like that. We don't have a similar marketplace issue that you had, Patricia, where it's, we're trying to make people meet in real life. We're trying to make them meet in like a 3-dimensional virtual world. And we do have a kind of like an issue of, a challenge, I would say, of, we have these virtual interactive worlds, and we do also have, we have UGC. So we have to think about policy and investigation in a different way than a lot of other companies do. We're not just like statically a video platform or a platform where we have just text. It's abuses happen in 3-dimensional space, and they're much more context focused. For example, you could have one asset or several different assets that are all individually okay to post and are non-violative, but the way you put them together and the things that you say around them, that may kind of tip it over into being a violation if it's, like a replication of something that is obviously violative or represents a glorification of real life harms, which is very difficult to deal with, because now we're talking about, kind of like moderating content in a kind of like a quasi real space. So it's definitely a unique challenge, and the kind of thing that kind of excites me to go to work every day.
No, I love that. Those are some great call outs. And it's that change that makes it fun, right? It's the challenge that makes it fun. It's solving these problems and having these conversations and thinking about, if X happens, well, wait a minute, like Y is like 2 steps down the road. Can we get to Y and start to anticipate? And both of you had, use this word prevent, right? Like prevention is a new term in trust and safety, where it was very reactive for years. Now we're like, how do we prevent this from happening? And it's been such a great fun shift in this work, at least for me, to think about, prevention versus, all right, this happened. Now how do we fix it? Right. We have one last question. I would like to get to. It came in from Riaz. This has been really useful. Thank you, Roz. How empowered do your teams find themselves when influencing product policy teams? He did say it's a selfish question. It's not very selfish. It's a great question. But how empowered do your teams find themselves when influencing product policy teams? Skip, I'll kind of jump to you because I think I'm obsessed with gaming. I think this is a fun question.
Sure. So how empowered do I feel? I mean, I feel like everyone wants more when they have any, like, oh, well, I wish I could do this and that and these other things. But, I do feel like, our team has the power to like make positive change in product and policy development, which is great to hear. Because coming in, I don't think I had any expectations that I would be kind of like helping design or test or, making serious changes in the way that we actually operate in the way that I am now. So I will say, yes, I do feel like we have the opportunity to make these positive changes. That said, obviously, there are also limitations to that. Oftentimes in tech companies, they're, as they have like this quarterly, OKRs and KPIs that they want to hit. And oftentimes things that have resources have been slotted a long time ago. So sometimes the things that I see individually, they can't necessarily be slotted right away, or they have to find some other resource that they can pull away from. There are a limited number of things that really can be done. So measuring expectations is important, but it's absolutely not uncommon that being a part of these teams, you really are helping call the shots in certain ways with products that actually make an impact in people's lives.
That's a great answer. Yeah, Patricia.
Yeah, it's I love sharing the stage with Skip. I mean, I think that's why I was like, oh, FBI. It's you're seriously so inspiring.
Oh, thank you.
I was going to say something very similar. I think there's a natural tension between operations, policy team, product, engineering. We all wish we could get everything in the roadmap. The reality is, with online safety, the work is never done. You're always going to be iterating, right? And a manager of mine once told me it's got to be like slow and steady progress. That's how you have to think about it and not get frustrated when you don't get those product priorities, into the roadmap. And I think that's a very wise way to look at it. One thing that I have really liked doing whenever possible in the companies that I worked for or advise is get engineers, folks from product to sit down with my teams and do shadowing sessions, because at times that technical side might be mind blown by the amount of manual labor that you're doing that can be improved in certain ways, right? So a good example of this is that the marketplace that I work for, I mentioned we were starting trust and safety from scratch. Initially, I was reporting into the general counsel, and this is something that Skip touched upon, right? Like trust and safety can report into many different orgs. And so I was reporting into general counsel, made a lot of sense. A lot of our work touched upon, legislation and regulation. But we quickly realized that we needed more traction on the product and eng side. So I was moved on to the technical side, and I absolutely loved it because those shadowing sessions, I could, I'd see our PM just be like, you gotta do what? Anytime you do a warning, like it takes how many like steps? This doesn't scale. I'm like, I know it doesn't scale. It's very challenging. So I would say encourage, to the extent that you can, your teams to sit down, build those relations with anybody in eng, product, policy as well. Policy is a great example too, because you can have a policy that in paper looks fantastic, looks very fair, but you can't actually enforce it at scale. Because maybe it takes too many warnings, and it takes too many hours of manpower to do all of those warnings, or what have you. So whenever possible, build those relations. Just know that there's going to be a natural tension, and don't be like me and get frustrated. Or if you are like me, I hope you have a supportive manager that can remind you that slow and steady does it, and you're not going to get the perfect roadmap tomorrow.
Right. But you can keep advocating for it, right? I mean, that
Mhm.
tension's a good thing. It allows you to sort of make the case and have those bigger conversations about why this stuff matters. And then I loved your just education, right? If we don't know that a certain safety issue is a problem, it's a constant process of education across teams, both internally and externally, to just raise awareness on that. Well, as I said, the start of this conversation, y'all know why I'm so impressed with these two and how grateful I am to have them as part of this conversation. Before we wrap up here, a couple quick call outs. Our founder, David Polgar, has been sharing some information. Highly encourage you to join the Slack community. There are thousands of folks, many of them just like Patricia and Skip, who are very passionate about this space and want to share and help and be a resource. Highly encourage that if you're aspiring. Keep an eye out for a mentorship program. We open up those cohorts a couple times a year. If you're at a university, Stephen Keltz is another great person to reach out to and look at starting an All-Tech is Human group on your campus and keep these conversations going, right? Get connected within the community. Be a part of what I think we all care about, right? More responsible innovation, responsible tech, and really advocating for trust and safety and creating safer, more inclusive online spaces, which does not come without some very tough conversations, which if you're like us, you enjoy those conversations. They're kind of fun, right? With that, as we wrap up here, want to kind of give one more shout out appreciation also for Skip. Where, if folks want to find you, what's the best way to connect and stay connected?
Of course. So the best place to find me is on LinkedIn, just Skip Gilmour. I think we might be sharing that out, but I'm happy to chat with anybody. Really, I am happy to talk.
I love it. Yeah, Patricia.
Yeah, for me, it's the same. LinkedIn, Patricia Cartes, all one word. I know that's kind of complex. Depending on how tired I am, if my toddlers get me up at night, I might respond in Spanish. You just really never know. But I too am I love talking to people, having people reach out, whether they're starting in their trust and safety careers or a different field wanting to break in. I once again, the community is the really big piece for me of this work. So please do reach out through LinkedIn, Blue Sky, what have you. I'm there.
I love it. Thank you, Patricia and Skip. We'll definitely be tagging these folks on Instagram. We reshare this video. And thank you for the questions, Christo and Riaz. Appreciate that. And Patricia and Skip, thank you. This is fun.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah.
Cheers, everyone.